All right, so folks, let's start. So today we'll look at some concepts and try to revise some concepts of how can we achieve security in networks, right? So far we studied security in layer 2 and some aspect of layer 3. I mean, we have looked at mischiefs anybody can do, like changing IP address or changing or using DSCP for bombarding illegal packets and so on, right? So today we try to look at in the second half of the lecture the protocol that we want to design. Okay, of course, protocol that we design actually protects two parties, right? The one sender and receiver. Okay, but still the other attacks that we have discussed, like I mean, where like DDoS attack, etc., can still be done, or IP address spoofing can still be done, right? So nobody can stop, right? I mean, whatever mechanism government does, if somebody wants to send you 1 million letters, such that the genuine letter that's coming from somebody is lost in that 1 million letters, nobody can stop. 1 million letters, if somebody writes on envelope your name, address, and put any fake source address or sender's address and put a stamp and send, it will ultimately come to you. Okay, so this kind of denial of service, because that will waste your time, because you're looking for something genuine, good, but you'll have to look through everything, all the letters that have come to find out the actual one. So what I'm trying to say is that you can't stop. Of course, there are some techniques to avoid DDoS, etc. And companies pay huge amount of money to these third parties, such that DDoS attacks can be, one can divert the traffic that's coming to a particular website and so on. So there are a lot of techniques available. Of course, we'll not get into that. So today we will focus ourselves to just IPSec protocol, which we'll study in second half. Before that, let's look at something really important that impacts us is how do you secure router or router at home? Okay, and this is a very good website I found. So of course I got the reference of this website from this this lecture by Professor Paul from Rutgers University. Okay, so just look at this. Just I would suggest you to go to this website and see. This website is dedicated only for router security. Okay, so last class we have studied in general about IP. We looked at what IP does and so on. And then we'll look at these attacks: DOS attack, denial of service attack, address spoofing attacks, and DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service attacks. And we have seen can be through simply spoofing IP address, or it can be done through use of some other protocols like DSCP protocol that we have seen, right? Okay, so today we'll look at attacks on routers. Just a minute. Okay, so what are routers? Routers are just nothing but, I mean, we don't have to look at the box and see that this is a very special thing. It's nothing but a computer designed and with special hardware designed to do routing and switching. Each router will also have a switch inside, right? When we say switch, normally we talk of layer 2 switches. So without layer 2 switch, we can't have layer 3 switch, right? So most of the routers have built-in functionality of switch as well. Okay. So now we are not concerned about design of router, which I'm sure you would have studied in networking course, not fully, but little bit about it. Okay. We are more concerned about what all is happening around routers, right? So People keep the default passwords and don't use strong passwords. What does it mean? Now we say that router is a device, is a computer. Okay, every computer has to have a user ID and password. That's what we call device password, right? For example, you have a refrigerator, fridge that we call, or a washing machine. So that also is a computer with attached functionality of washing clothes, or refrigerator is just for cooling, stuff. Okay, so we'll have to look at the interface, which is a computer, and then that computer also will have user ID and password. So all IoT devices will have user ID and password. Okay, that way router is also a computer, so it will have a user ID and password. So what happens when somebody comes to install your router, or when you buy a router, like I have bought one, advanced router, because it allowed some programming, so I bought it. But of course, I didn't use it much, because in between technology change became cable, and then all that became useless for me. Anyway, I can still use it for layer 3. But most of us get routers. Even now, the 2 routers that I have are provided by service provider, right? I have Jio and Airtel. Okay, the people who come to install it are usually technicians, have limited knowledge of technology. And I have not seen ever in last 5-6 times they came both in Goa and here to install router, they know anything about device user ID and password. It's written in the box, okay, or paper inside. So now most of us, even who are educated ones, even the students who are CS students or working in IT industry, have no clue about every device needs protection. Okay, so now, what happens? That your user ID and password, your router's user ID and password is known to everyone. Okay, hence anybody can get into it. That's one thing. Second thing is that, okay, even if somebody is able to get, it has to exploit, some of the vulnerabilities, right? Because OS in the router may not allow. There are some user level applications, some kernel level application there as well, right? So it has to know the vulnerabilities. Okay, so, and every company, whether it's a laptop making company or router making company or whatever, or IoT company, they keep on changing the software, right? So you receive continuously patches. Why do you receive it? And why? Because they find out vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities are either found by themselves or somebody else, but they fix it and send you patch. And most of us never update our router software. And that's the reason, it is said that if you want to keep your computer always safe, minimally you need to do is to update your computer. So, there is a feature in Windows and OS that the software should be updated automatically. And we should always switch on that, because while you're sleeping or sometime other, it will download, patches and apply. So if you have not modified your software contents, and the hacker or malware can easily find out what is the version of the software, like port scanning is one method, can find out version of your software, then the hacker knows what are the vulnerabilities there and can use that. Okay, all right. Okay, so other attacks are that denial of service. Okay, flood the router. See, what you're talking is some of the vulnerabilities, or router can be flooded with ICMP packets or ping packets, right? And of course, routing table poisoning, we have already studied that. In case of L2, we have studied, but so every switching device, whether router or layer 2 switch, will have a routing table or switching table. Okay, is there a way to poison that routing table? Yes, there are ways. So that's another possibility. So what we have seen now, there are multiple ways a router vulnerabilities can be exploited. And simplest most is of course use of, most of us use as a statistics came that almost 70-80% routers are vulnerable. Okay, all right. Now you must be wondering that who will know default user ID and password is all published. You don't need to do anything. Just Google it, you will get it. Like this list, right? It's available here. This includes all the routers that we have in the world, which are common one. Of course, I mean, if you Google specific ones, you can always get it, right? And you will get all what is here, username and password. These are the default ones. When we say common, they are using word common. It's not necessarily that every version of the router that they come out will have same username and password, but for a version or a model of a router, they usually have the same default user ID and password. Okay, and how do you access it at home? Suppose you want to change configuration of the router. How do you access the router? Through web interface? Anyone tried that?
Gateway.
Yeah, so there has to be IP address, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that IP address is also published. Okay, so these are the ones. And then we have seen headlines about what kind of problems people have faced, okay, in the router. Okay, all right. So router security is very important because it touches all of us. So almost 60% of users around the world have never updated routers firmware. Earlier we have talked about they have never changed user ID and password default. But another statistic is that 60% users never update the router's firmware. Okay, basically all the patches that you use, hardware you cannot change, but the OS and all the patches around can be all vulnerabilities. Every patch may contain some improvement over previous one in terms of security or performance, right? Okay, so all right, so if you don't update it, then there's a basic hassle that we have just discussed, right? Then hacker will come to know that what is the version of the software you're using, and then will know all the bugs or exploits. See, the problem is that the infected router does not necessarily show the sign of weakness. First thing is that you're not even observant of that. A router is in one corner of the house and you're not bothered. And even if the router hardware is taking a lot of time in processing because of malware sitting and doing something, you will think that internet speed is low. That's the reason some diseases are very dangerous, right? Like cancer. Person doesn't come to know that he or she has cancer till very last stage, right? Because there is no outward symptoms most of the time. And if there are symptoms, we of course ignore that. So same thing is happening with routers, that if there are symptoms, then something is wrong. If there's no symptom, like there may be virus in your laptop and you will not know for years, because the viruses today or malware are so smart, then they hide themselves, right? Okay, they make sure that they will do activities when laptop is not being used, right? Or maybe during the night time and so on. So these malwares are very smart. They will keep on hiding on your laptop for years without you knowing it. Okay, so attackers know all this vulnerability, can exploit it. So now because of these, that default user ID and password, the attackers can gain access to routers. The moment they gain access to routers, they can gain access to the connected devices. Okay, so there are a number of ways they can do it. For example, from suppose you have connected your mobile phone to your Wi-Fi router, and from that Wi-Fi router, if that Wi-Fi router has a malware, the malware can spread itself to your device. That's your handset or mobile phone. Okay, but how do you know that your router has been infected? Have you ever tried to find it out? How do you know? Anyone? Then how do you fix it? Rebooting is not a solution, right? We often reboot a machine. It happens because memory is freed up and so on, so performance improves at times. But that's not the way, right? Okay, so there is actually no proper way until you have higher end router. Your home router, you can't do anything, just can't. Okay, all right. So your router can steal all the information, can infect your device and so on. That's fine. Although it's not good, it can take away all your user ID and password. See, you're doing banking transaction, right? Or share transactions. All that you are using is the user ID and password, sometimes OTP. Now, all these three things, user ID, password, and OTP, are available on your mobile in clear text. When you are typing your user ID and password, it cannot be encrypted right in the beginning. The keylogger can always find out what you're typing. And the OTP that comes to your mobile phone is also available in clear text. So all these things are information for malware to make use of it, right? Okay, that's one aspect of attack. Other aspect is that, see, you may be a nice person, but your router may be running a bot and doing all criminal activities. You may not like, your router, your computing available in your router to be used for malicious activity. Okay, and the DDoS attacks often happen by using IoT devices and routers, because these criminals also have limited resources. If they want, say, 10 millions of bots to attack a website, they are not going to buy so many of VMs from Amazon.com. They are going to use your and mine bots. They will plant bots on your and my Wi-Fi routers and IoT devices. So one attack that's known, if you Google it, you'll find hundreds of such attacks. One Mirai attack is very popular. Popular in the sense that's known to everyone. And by the way, you go to darknet, you can rent. Say you want 50,000 bots. Some criminal, would have created this bot in different Wi-Fi routers, and they can give you all that. See, Wi-Fi router, look at the bot here. What's the nice concept, right? They are eating your electricity, same computing, or and then computing resources and internet. All right. There. So, all right. So this is a problem, right? All the information that this point we have discussed. Okay, they see router is the best place for stealing your information. There's a reason. One way to avoid routers mischiefs is basically you encrypt everything right at the source. So don't use HTTP at all. Use only HTTPS. Okay, one way. All right. Okay. They can also do man in the middle attacks. Okay, and you will not come because you are sending some information in the router. In the router, this malware sitting will receive it and change it, and then send it to server. And whatever server sends will receive this and modify it and send it to you. So you will never come to know. By the way, do you think that your ISP don't see what all is happening? Sometimes we suspect. I mean, we know that Google, of course, has looks at all that you do on Google applications, right? This is legally they see, and they legally they exploit it. But they remain. It remains confidential in the machine. Okay, then. So, but they share information learned from you to their other groups for exploitation, for throwing advertisement and so on, right? Okay, whatever you do on Google is all visible to Google, and that's the condition you have signed. But you think your ISP is innocent? Try doing some experiments and you'll come to know that information leaks also from ISPs. Okay, they can see everything that you can see. If you are encrypting your data at the end, you're doing HTTPS or some or using some other mechanism, they cannot see exactly what's going on. But I mean, you cannot IP address that you are going to use, that's all visible, right? Most of the time your IP address and destination IP address, because IP header is usually in clear text, so they can come to know what exactly is happening. Okay, so there are some checklists in the same website. You can find this checklist available. Never use default passwords. That's first thing you need to do, and tell your friends and relatives also to change it. And there's a method given. You Google it, you will find out the method for the router. Okay, and then always use HTTPS. If the don't go to website where HTTPS is not supported. Okay, and don't use small passwords in your router. Well, they can also be there are ways to break it. Okay, check how good the router company is. Of course, you don't have choice because the routers are given by uh, ISPs, but still you can buy your own router, high-end router, and that router can also have a firewall. Okay, when you okay, and make sure some routers do allow guest Wi-Fi. I mean, every router has some guest SSID or login IDs. Okay, what all guest what if guest is, of course, user ID and password is general default, or you can inform that. But once the guest is into your router, then what all permissions the person has? Can guest also change the router's configuration? Okay, that should not be allowed. Okay, and then you have to check out of the web interface. Don't keep logged in there, and so on, right? And then secure DNS allowed or not. You'll have to see whether router software firmware is upgraded regularly. Many routers don't even allow. And if they allow, then you have to see whether it's getting updated regularly. Okay. Similarly, SSID, the channel name, like you put your friend's name or some name to the channel, so you have to also change it regularly. All right. Okay. So these are another, and there's something you would have studied, right? That Wi-Fi, of course, password has to be 16 character long, which I don't think one of you would have done it. And then encryption should be WPA2. Since you have not studied Wi-Fi, so you may not know about it. Then there is a method called WPS. Okay, you have to turn it off. I would request you to Google and find out what WPS is. This is an old technique. Similarly, turn off UPnP. This is an interesting protocol which even TVs use. Okay, for device, recovery and so on. I mean, discovery, not recovery, discovery and so on. So earlier it was very popular method. Even in mobile phones, we had UPnP still, but this is a typical security threat. So don't use it if you really not intended to use a particular feature in the device. So switch it off. And many others. Please read it through this one. Now the question is that now we are talking about you as a designer. Okay, you have a machine here. Okay, maybe let's assume laptop, and then this is connected to a router, right? We call it gateway router. Gateway is word we use word gateway when it is connecting to external world, not within the organization, right? Okay, so now this is another gateway, and this is a destination machine. Okay, this is your source machine or your laptop. Okay, now this is the scenario. You have to, of course, secure everything. This is the path. You have to secure everything. That's the first choice, right? It means that security must start from your laptop, end up in the device or machine or server or laptop or the other end. What is the other way? Other way is, this, if this comes in trusted zone, and similarly this comes in trusted zone, there is connection between your machine and gateway. It could be LAN or whatever, but it's quite trusted one, right? Then you can think of security between these, because this here channel here is visible to everyone, in secure channel, right? Like public internet. Public internet, we cannot assume it's secure, right? It's visible to all right? So there are two choices here: do end to end or between one gateway router and another gateway router. Okay, all right. So there are two choices. Okay, so that we have studied here, right? Okay. So now think about, we have studied everything that is needed for you to design security protocol. When you are in IP layer, right? We are not talking about TCP as yet, right? So this IP layer, you are running 3 layers: physical layer, data link layer, and IP layer. Now here we are trying to, so you have basically, when you say IP layer, you have IP packet available, right? This is the header, which have all the fields that you studied, and this is data. Okay, how can you provide security now? And in between you have all Mallory, 2D, Eve, all sitting here. And you assume that even Mallory and 2D are sitting in, even within the router. somewhere in between there will be routers, and Mallory have access to that router. So now the question is that what can you do? What techniques you will use? And it has to be part of the protocol so that it will go inside IP protocol or do something about IP. So you have this IP packet. You need to protect it. Now, when we say you need to protect it, what do you mean? You need to protect data. Okay, such that Mallory cannot change the data and Eve cannot read the data. Okay. What is the second thing? What else you need to protect? Anyone? You're the designer, bhai. I am asking the question. You know as much as I know. Gunjan, can you tell me? Are you there?
Yes, sir.
हाँ बताओ फिर क्या प्रोटेक्ट करना चाहिए मतलब डेटा तो प्रोटेक्ट कर लिया हमने some method. What else we need to protect? What are the goals of security in general? हमने पढ़ा है ना फर्स्ट क्लास में पढ़ा था सेकंड क्लास में. When you say we need to secure, what all we need to do? See, you would have seen triad. Na? We need to have confidentiality. Confidentiality, we have done this, right? All the data that's in the packet, you can do something for confidential, like we can encrypt. Second is integrity. Okay, one aspect of integrity is that actually packet is coming from this source. Where is this information about the source IP address?
In the header.
In the header, right? Very good. So we need to also protect header, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. These two things we need to minimally protect. Okay, how do we protect this thing here? The data part by encryption. Simply we use encryption method, right? We can use public we can use symmetric key encryption, okay, where both hands use the same key. So this end and the end here will use the same key. So when there is remember when there is a lot of communication happening between two parties, then fastest encryption method we should use. And fastest encryption method is symmetric key encryption, right? AES, DES, and all that we have studied. These are very fast. And asymmetric key encryption, remember from our discussion, it has some beauty, right? It has great, I mean, you can do encryption for data, but it requires lot of time. So you cannot do it for, when there's a huge amount of data communication happening. But it can happen to encrypt something that you are sending, right? For example, some minimal information you're sending, like key you're sending to the other end, or some minimum parameters, then you can use asymmetric key encryption or public key encryption, right? Okay. Now, how do you achieve? Okay, so let's move ahead. Okay, so we need in general confidential and integrity. The question is, how do you achieve confidentiality and integrity? And the methods that we have studied is encryption we use for confidentiality, right? So Mallory in between, whatever text is going on, she reads this. She cannot find out because it's all encrypted. Okay, so we use encryption. Now the question is that now we are talking about a layer 3, but encryption can be used at all layers, right? Even we can use encryption methods at layer 2 or link layer. Of course, there are protocols available for that, and we have not gone into details of that design. But right now we are talking about this layer. So we can do encryption here, and like IPSec protocol that we use, we will discuss in the next class, we'll use encryption here. And encryption can also be used at higher layers, like application layer, like then the protocols are called SSL, PGP, SSH, and HTTPS. Not to letter S here, right? So we'll study one of these. Okay, so now IPSec, for IPSec, we know now that we'll have to use encryption. And this encryption, because it has to be fast, hence we have to use symmetric encryption. Okay, all right. Now symmetric encryption, there are various algorithms. We have studied some of these, like AES, DES, and so on, right? And of course, there are many modes in that, right? So now AES and DES, your machine can support, say, some version, some protocol. This because there are many. This machine doesn't support many, right? It supports only few. So there has to be some dialogue between two machines to agree on some crypto algorithm. All right. So this is also another phase that from this you can make out that yes, this is also a requirement that the crypto algorithm negotiation has to happen. So our protocol IPSec has to have some way for two ends to agree on some crypto algorithm, because there are many crypto algorithms that are supported. All right. Now let's further design. So which encryption algorithm? Of course, we have answered this. AES cannot be used. Oh, sorry, asymmetric encryption. I'm so sorry. Asymmetric encryption algorithm cannot be used because it's very slow. And it's not meant for continuous data or stream encryption, right? For streaming data encryption, cannot use it. So we have to use one of these, AES, DES, and one of these modes that you studied, right? And all this will be part of negotiation between two entities when they will agree on the common protocols. Okay. Now we have also seen that we are doing symmetric key encryption. Okay. What does symmetric key encryption require? So both ends have to use same key. This key and the key here are the same. Then how do they agree on the key? How do they actually have the same key? And note that we have in between is insecure channel. Then we have studied the way to do is Diffie-Hellman algorithm, right? With the Diffie algorithm, both parties here, say for example, Alice and Bob, she selects a parameter A, which is private to Alice, B private to Bob, and then she generates some public parameter. We are not going to detail now, and send it over here. And similarly, Bob sends some public parameter. Alice receives Bob's parameters and calculates the common key. Right? We have studied that, right? Using EAB or whatever, right? You will remember that. Okay. So both through Diffie-Hellman we get the common key. So now one thing is also sure that for two ends to have same key, we need Diffie-Hellman, right? So our IPSec protocol will also use Diffie-Hellman. Is it clear? Any question? We are trying to design. I mean, it's not part of any book. I just thought I will present it in this way. What else you need to provide security at when you're designing this protocol? What do you need? So we have encrypted the data, but have you solved the problem of integrity, authenticity?
No, sir.
No, we have not yet. Okay. So now we'll look at what are the authentication methods. No, it means that the packet that Bob is receiving actually comes from Alice. That's it. Okay, of course, a aspect of there is a non-repetition, etc., etc. That can happen by some method. Okay, and of course, the packet has not been altered in the transit. Now, which of course is taken care by symmetric pre-encryption. So largely we are interested in the first point. The Alice is actually sending the packet which is received by Bob, nobody else. No, it's not packet coming from Mallory. So now what can we do? We have studied all these cryptographic hash. So you have message and then get the digest for that or H of M and send it to other party. Does it work? Will it work? Yeah, I'm asking question. Apply what you have learned.
Mallory can still edit the hash.
Yes, so it is not. Very good. It's not. Can we use MAC and HMAC? Now this uses key, right? You remember this diagram. The key here and both are same. So in some way we can use MAC or HMAC. Okay, does it solve all the problem? Can you do non-repudiation?
No, sir.
We cannot do non-repudiation. Hence, we need signature. We have seen the only, see, because the key here is the same. In HMAC, the key is same. So non-repudiation cannot be done. So we need signature. Signature, it means that we are using asymmetric key encryption like RSA, etc. And Alice is using her private key, which only Bob can. Bob of course with public key can decrypt, but that will 100% ascertain to Bob is because only Alice knows her private key, so she would have used a key to sign. Okay, is that enough? How does Bob know Alice's public key? How he is ensured that actually public key which even Alice is sending is correct? So somebody might have changed it in between. So all the game will work with the public key that you have to decrypt something is correct. It's actually from Alice, right? So only way to ascertain that is digital certificate. So Alice will also attach a digital certificate about her public key, and then Bob can use that. And through digital certificate method, we know how it works, right? Okay. So now can we conclude? Okay, so this all we have studied, digital signature, etc. Right? So can we? Okay. So can we say that now our IPSec algorithm needs to have the following? First is that it should have AES or DES or whatever, or any other symmetric key encryption. Fine, this first requirement we have. Second requirement, in another thing is that any one of these symmetric, there are multiple alternatives are available, right? So there must be a way to negotiate and agree on a set of crypto algorithms, right? Crypto algorithm. This is the second thing. Third thing, what do you need? we need, and we have seen use of asymmetric key, right? Asymmetric key algorithm. Okay, so we need to, before that, here we have to use Diffie-Hellman algorithm to have a common key, section key. Now here we have to symmetric key algorithm we have to use, and then for that we have to generate private key and public key at both ends. Okay. Anything else? Then we need digital signature. For what? Authenticity. No, that's not enough. Now, Bob also needs to know the public key, because public key, somebody sends a fraudulent public key and then may not want to use that, right? So he can only believe digital certificates. Okay, so we have not yet answered one thing, that if this is IP packet, this part we have taken care of. How can you transmit this packet with source ID, source IP, and destination IP, and other parameters in plain text or open or naked? Everyone can see that. Okay, now somebody can always do some kind of attack, right? So how can you avoid that? What could be way? If you encrypt this, then gone. A router in between can't even see that, right? Then we use the same method as people have been using in the past. If you want to send a letter to your fiancé and you want to avoid your mother-in-law, then what do? Put the envelope into another envelope and write your fiancé's friend's name. The letter will go there, she will open it, remove the letter and give it to your fiancé. Okay, so same thing we can use. It's called encapsulation. So put this and original IP packet that your machine is sending into another IP packet, and then this address could be that of some gateway router. Okay, and part of this can also be encrypted. This, which is not required, can be, not really required for routing, can also be encrypted. But all these can pose some kind of penalty. Okay, all right. So we now have a method of which we call, of course, the encapsulation. Okay, so these are the methods that we are going to use to design IPSec. Now you can think of designing, how to design, what will do first, what will do second, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the reason this IPSec is considered to be extremely complex, and when it was designed, they gave a lot of flexibility. So one of the important algorithm within that is called internet key exchange algorithm. Key exchange algorithm. Okay, we will not go into details. Okay, we'll look at only at important aspects in the next class. So now coming to protocol level, so we see that IPSec is just, actually it's not correct, it just sits on top of IP, because it uses IP packet, right? So we are modifying IP packet. I mean, so IP packet, we are adding some header in between. Okay, So we'll see that. Okay, of course, one of the major application of IPSec is VPN. Like you use VPN to connect to IIT Goa server. Okay. All right. So basically, there are three important areas which you have covered: authentication, confidentiality, and key management. Okay. Of course, these two, in order to do these two, will require key management. How to exchange the keys, like creating a session key, right? Goals of IPSec is that verify source of IP address such that header is not manipulated, provide authenticity, okay, integrity and confidentiality. And another thing that we have not discussed is how to prevent replaying of the old packets. Replay is called replay attacks. Okay, and it, of course, once we know that IP provides security, IP layer, then it provides security to higher layers as well. And these techniques we use, which we have studied already by now. Okay, like we use encryption for confidentiality, hash for integrity, keyed hash, okay, signature and certificates for authentication, and Diffie-Hellman algorithm for key distribution. Now this gives one how VPNs are used. Okay, we can have VPN between two endpoints, okay, or two gateway routers, or between endpoint and a gateway routers. Any combinations are possible, right? And now what you see here is that, look at the IP packet. So you can see there is a change in IP packet, and we have here IPSec header. Okay, when suppose this packet is sent for this machine here, or sorry, machine here, then this if the IPSec runs between the end node and gateway router, then this gateway router will remove this portion and send the original IP packet to the machine. Okay. Now, if your machine is not capable of generating IPSec packet, then your machine can generate simple IP packet, and this packet, when it goes to gateway router, it will create another packet which will have, this IPSec field. All right. When this packet reaches to another end, the gateway router can remove it and pass on the same packet, received packet, to destination node. Okay. So this is a very complex protocol, requires hundreds of pages of reading. If you have time and interest, you can read. Okay. So in the next class, we'll cover some of these concepts. All right. So these things we have already discussed. All right. So that's all. Any question? You apply this concept that we have studied today, you can design even layer 4 protocol. When we study higher level security protocol, we will see that we'll not go into this detail. We'll say that we'll apply these basic techniques and we achieve the result. Okay. Any question? All right. See you then on Wednesday.